This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone on the Talkstar Radio Network, X-Zone Broadcast Network, UK High Definition Radio, Euro High Definition Radio, Star Cable, and our growing family of broadcast affiliates right across Canada, the United States, Central America, South America, the Pacific Rim, Asia, India, Africa, and Europe. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour is Dr. Jim Carlson. We're going to be talking to Dr. Jim about his new book that is out. It's entitled, listen to this, Exonation. This is going to give you an idea where this conversation is going in the next hour. Genocide. How your doctor's dietary ignorance will kill you. Now, what if everything you thought you knew about nutrition and dieting was wrong? Wouldn't surprise me at all. Dr. James Carlson was once more than 70 pounds overweight with high cholesterol, blood pressure, and blood sugar. When the medically accepted way to eat made him require daily medication, he embarked on a personal and professional journey to find the truth about healthy eating. His conclusion? A low carbohydrate, there's a good one to talk about on a Wednesday. A low carbohydrate diet is the only safe and healthy way to eat. Now, today his cholesterol, hypertension, and type 2 diabetes are gone, and thousands of people that he has worked with, Exonation, have also had similar results. Dr. James Carlson has degrees in biochemistry and cellular physiology from Cornell University and a medical degree from New York College of Osteopathic Medicine. He has been in private practice for 20 years. He is an expert in health and healthcare, economics, and law, and is the author of Genocide, How Your Doctor's Dietary Ignorance Will Kill You. Joining me now is Dr. Jim. And Dr. Jim, welcome to the X-Zone.
Thanks so much for having me.
First of all, you know, as a member of the medical profession, what do you think about diets in general?
I think diets in general, I don't like the term diet at all because diet just means something short term. You know, hey, I'm going to go on a diet for a couple of days, maybe a week, maybe a month, and, you know, after I get to where I want, say, weight-wise. Because really, you know, diet for most people means they're focused on their weight. So once I get down to a weight, I'm going to stop and go back to how, you know, what I was doing, you know, beforehand. So I don't even like to use the word diet in my practice. It's, you know, for me, it's a behavioral thing, behavioral change. You know, when you start understanding the correct way to eat and start eating the right way, it's a forever thing, or it should be.
So as everything else in today's society, do we all look for quick fixes?
Absolutely. Quick fixes, give me a pill, give me that pill, give me this pill. Oh, the pill doesn't work, causes side effects, let's sue the pharmaceutical companies. But you know what? We're the ones asking the pharmaceutical companies for these quick fixes, and then we turn on them when, you know, it falls short of what we're after. But we all want quick fixes. It's
pretty bad when lawyers now go on television advertising for people who have taken certain medications that have suffered certain recourse or certain ailments because of the medication, and they say, call me, we'll get money for you. I think that's pretty pathetic.
You know what? It is pathetic. And those medications, I've been in the practice of medicine for 20 years now, and I can't tell you how many countless times I've actually had my patients on these medicines that, you know, a lot of them aren't even recalled. There's class action suits going on with these. And these are medicines that are helping people to, you know, basically be alive, for goodness sakes.
You know, I'm sorry, sir. We've got to take a commercial break here, but I was just going to say is that we hear about the odd case that is bad, but we don't hear about the millions of cases that these drugs have helped.
Absolutely. Absolutely correct.
Dr. Carlson, please stand by. Glad you're with us today, Doctor. Exonation Dr. Jim Carlson is my special guest. www.drjamescarlson.com. and he is the author of Genocide, How Your Doctor's Dietary Ignorance Will Kill You. And we'll be back on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break as the X Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Exonation, Dr. Jim Carlson is our special guest. He's the author of Genocide, How Your Doctor's Dietary Ignorance Will Kill You. His website, www.drjamescarlson.com. That's DRJamesCarlson.com. You know, one of the little subtitles on your PR material grabbed me. Dispelling myths about food, why eating fruit will make you fatter than eating a Snickers bar?
That gets everybody. It gets everyone who hears that, and it just goes back to the foundation of what's creating our health problems. Mm-hmm. I don't think I need to tell anyone the number one killer of men and women is, of course, heart disease.
Right.
And when you look at cholesterol, when you look at fat, the way the body creates these molecules, the starting point for the creation of cholesterol and fat in our bodies is indeed the glucose or the fructose molecule. Now, glucose, when you say sugar, you tend to think of glucose. Mm-hmm. We also tend to think of, fructose as being a sugar as well, and it is. But see, fructose is found in fruit, right?
Right.
It's the number one sugar in fruit. And the biochemical fact is that fructose needs to be modified less in our cells to create plaque-forming deadly cholesterol and fat than glucose. So if you eat say an apple, mm-hmm. and you eat a Snickers bar along with that apple, the sugar, the fructose in the apple, will be converted into plaque-forming deadly cholesterol and fat quicker than the sugar in the Snickers bar because it needs to be modified less. That's the fructose needs to be modified less. Now, I'm not advocating, of course, to go out there and start eating, Snickers bars and Butterfingers and all that, but I'm just trying to point out a biochemical fact, that both fructose found in fruit and glucose found in everything else, both of these sugars are extremely dangerous, and we need to emphasize the fact that those plaques, or that plaque that develops on our coronary arteries, or any artery for that matter, has come from the modification of sugar molecules. When you eat cholesterol and fat in a diet, that is saturated fat and cholesterol in a diet, that's your red meat, your egg yolk, your chicken skin, the butter. That fat and cholesterol is not used by the body to make cholesterol and fat. It actually increases your production of HDL, your healthy cholesterol, and it actually lowers your risk for not only heart disease, but obesity, type 2 diabetes, and many types of cancers. So that's actually a biochemical fact making that statement.
Tell me, Doctor, why is the current USDA dietary guidelines, as well as Michelle Obama's My Plate campaign, so dangerous?
Loaded question. It's dangerous on many levels. And the My Plate campaign is basically the food pyramid redressed. Instead of a pyramid, we're creating circles now, which are represented by plates. And it's just the same thing. It calls for an overabundance or preponderance of carbohydrate consumption and a lowered amount of fat and cholesterol consumption. It basically sticks to the incorrect premise that low-fat, low-cholesterol eating is the correct way to eat, because we're thinking in the medical profession that the more fat and cholesterol one consumes, the more unhealthy you are. The My Plate campaign, has a big plate and a little plate. On the big plate are all your whole grains and your fruit, and it's like 4 to 6 servings here, 7 to 11 servings there. Then you got your little tiny plate, usually on the right-hand side of the image, and it has like your fats and your cholesterol. So eat a little bit of that. But you see, low-fat, low-cholesterols have never been shown in any language, in any country, in any study to be the correct way to eat. And if you really analyze the studies, you see that the more cholesterol and fat one removes from the diet, the more unhealthy the individual becomes.
Based on your experience, Doctor, are human beings supposed to be vegetarian or carnivorous?
Carnivorous, carnivorous, the way we, looking at our teeth makeup, the incisors, the molars, ripping and grinding. Our intestines are basically our carnivorous, intestines. Compare our mouth to, say, a known carnivore, like a wolf, of course. We have a more blunt nose, they have a longer nose.
Yeah.
But look at the gastrointestinal system of, say, like a wolf compared to a human, very similar. Compare our gastrointestinal systems to a known herbivore. We'll use the cow as the example, and it is utterly different, no pun intended. They have a 4-chamber, stomach. They have extremely long intestines. We're not, meant to be herbivores. And I'll get the argument, but Doc, what about omnivores? Should we be eating a little bit of this and a little bit of that? And I'll actually, get into that a little bit and say, well, yeah, because I encourage the consumption of green leafy vegetables, but I'll also encourage people to stay away from fruits and whole grains and multigrains and your root vegetables like carrots and things like that. So our genetic makeup, or I should say our anatomical and physiological makeup, is indeed geared toward carnivorism.
Well, let's talk a second or two about genetically modified foods. How are they affecting the human body?
Tremendously. Basically, with these GMO foods, what you're looking at is, instead of a regular size, say, apple or grapefruit or whatnot, you're seeing, or strawberries, you're seeing huge foods, much bigger. And basically what's happening is the nutrient amount is being lowered because it's being, just the amount of sugar is like, 5-10 times the amount. It dwarfs the nutrients, that you see within, say, the strawberry you're eating. And you and I both know that if you go to the store and you look at strawberries, they're huge. I mean,
they
are. Things are huge. But in the wild, like non-GMO foods, they're smaller, much smaller, which means less sugar, more antioxidants, more nutrients. So I guess the simple way to say it, Rob, is that our GMOs are actually nutrient. There's a sparsity, a paucity of nutrients, compared to naturally occurring foods. So your end result is more sugar, more problems.
All right, and how about organic, non-organic?
Organic, non-organic, basically what organic tends to mean is that it's more naturally grown. Let's back off on the pesticides, the herbicides, the fungicides. Let's back off and say, hormones, things like that, antibiotics. So I'm definitely a promoter of organic, versus non-organic. It doesn't mean you can't grow organic foods in your own garden. It's just, I'm somebody who gears more toward organic foods. So but again, let me just, I don't mean to cut you off, but, organic foods, you could still get into trouble with them if there's an overpreponderance of sugar.
All right, so the junk that our kids eat, that must be causing chaos to their systems. Because, I use this as an example. Went to a grocery store to pick up something at lunchtime. Kids are walking in from school, which was right across the street. They're walking out with a giant-sized bottle of Diet Pop, bags of potato chips, and this is their lunch.
Right.
Is that, how come the agencies responsible for the well-being of people, whether it's in the United States, Canada, or Great Britain, are not putting a halt to this and saying, hey, we're talking about obesity here. We're talking about problems in the future with your health. Let's do something about it now.
And to take that a step further, and I fully support what you just said, we sit here and we wonder, why the rates of autism are going sky high, why we're seeing diseases that used to just be known to individuals in the 40s and 50s, we're seeing in children under the age of 10. It's definitely an ignorance. It's definitely a profound ignorance. It also begs the question how much lobbying is going on with the food industry, to allow us to not see the correct way to eat or to understand it. I mean, potato chips and Diet Coke. I guess the better part of that meal, no joke, would be the Diet Coke because you got a little sugar in it. And the potato chips, of course, carbohydrates and all that. And the problem with potato chips, it has a fat known as a trans fat, partially hydrogenated oil, which is an extremely dangerous thing, increases your risk for heart disease, cancer. The way we're eating, the way that the food is being promoted, low fat, low cholesterol, being healthy, we're actually seeing heart disease now in children, who are just hitting their teens and even in tweens.
Unreal.
Before 13. It's scary stuff.
Yeah, I was very glad to see some school boards actually taking the initiative and having pop machines removed from their schools.
Right.
even though they were making a pretty penny from the sale of pop in their school and the snacks. So my hat's off to these school boards who are saying, all right, let's do something about it. I remember when I was going to school, we used to have health classes. We had a health textbook that taught us, what about the importance of sleeping, the importance about a proper diet, the importance of exercise. And you know what? My kids and grandchildren, they don't know what that's about.
No. It's funny you say that. I remember distinctly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, I remember learning about the food pyramid.
That's right.
And, the fruits and the vegetables and the whole grains and all that, and how you should avoid fat. And it's interesting because, when I was growing up, I was very much into competitive bodybuilding, and I didn't understand the correct way to eat, so I would be doing low-fat, low-cholesterol, eating a lot of carbs, and wondering why, I was actually always tired, mentally fatigued, and all. But, we did learn, and take these things and help. And I must say, too, that my daughter, who's now in 6th grade, when she was in 3rd grade, she was learning, all about ways to eat, which unfortunately was the incorrect way to eat, low fat, low cholesterol still being propagated today in the school system.
How do we change all that, Doctor? I'm sure that yourself and other members of the medical community are doing their best, doing what they can in order to teach as many people and get this message out to as many people as you can. But where do you see the educational system stepping in?
It's another loaded question. I honestly don't know. I get asked that all the time, and being 20 years out in medicine, educating one person at a time, being lucky enough to be invited on talk shows such as yours, I guess it's going to be a grassroots educational thing. And I'm not the only physician, though, interestingly enough, who understands the correct way to eat. I mean, if anybody goes online and types in lowcarbdoctor.com, you'll see, physicians, scattered throughout United States and Canada, who understand the correct way to eat. But, I think you really have to change it at, say, the policy level, at, say, the municipality or even the governmental level, where the governments have to become knowledgeable and understand the correct way to eat. And I always try to use the word understand the correct way to eat, because the correct way to eat shouldn't be someone's theory, opinion, supposition, or anything like that. It should be based on distinct biochemical knowledge, facts, and proof. And it really is an understanding when you start knowing that eating, low-fat, low-cholesterol is a dangerous, way to eat. And at the start of the show, you mentioned that I was 70 pounds heavier, overweight, high blood pressure, sugars were horrible, lipid panel was terrible. And I actually embarked, at that moment in time, I did not understand the correct way to eat, so I actually embarked on the low-fat, low-cholesterol eating regime, and I gained weight, and my numbers got worse, and that's how I wound up on medications. And, I luckily happened upon some of the low-carb literature. And there's voluminous stuff out there. Atkins, of course, will ring a bell.
Well, let's talk about that when we come back from this news break.
Absolutely.
Dr. Jim Carlson's our special guest. www.drjamescarlson.com. He's the author of Genocide: How Your Doctor's Dietary Ignorance Will Kill You. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone.
This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Welcome back, everyone. Dr. James Carlson is my special guest. He's the author of Genocide: How Your Doctor's Dietary Ignorance Will Kill You. His website is www.drjamescarlson.com. I am a strong believer in the Atkins diet. When I went on the Atkins diet, I was 270 pounds. I've had 3 heart attacks, and the list goes on and on and on. I was able to drop 35 pounds, and I feel great. Why is there such a controversy within the dietary community when it comes to the Atkins diet and the low carbohydrate diets?
Oh, there is a lot of controversy, and it's interesting because once you delve into that and look at the foundations of the Atkins way of eating, the controversy just dissipates. And it's interesting because I didn't always understand the correct way to eat. So, when I was 70 pounds heavier and went on a low-fat, low-cholesterol eating style, I gained weight, things got worse. I came across, of course, the Atkins books.
Yeah.
And, I was a biochemist, a molecular cell biologist, undergraduate, and, I was actually at a good vantage point for understanding what Dr. Atkins was promoting. And after I read his books, I knew immediately that I was going to take off the weight, and I knew it was going to be a life-changing thing. But I also have to say this, that I was so ignorant, like most of my colleagues, that I would counsel people, do not do Atkins. Too much protein, you're going to shut the kidneys down, you're going to go blind, you're going to ruin your liver. And I'm actually embarrassed that I, didn't understand and had these strong opinions without even reading it and trying to understand it. And that's what it goes back to. It goes back to an understanding. It's so ingrained in us that fat and cholesterol is bad for us, that we shouldn't be eating that. So it's just hard to change that indoctrination. And I've grappled with this for years because for the last 16 years, I've literally put thousands and thousands of patients on Atkins style of eating, mainly the induction phase if they're obese, type 2 diabetic, heart disease, or whatnot. They'll stay on the induction phase, which for the listeners is 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrates a day, and they'll stay on that forever. That's what I've been staying on the last 16 years, and I've done fantastic. It goes. I think it has a lot to do with deductive reasoning, Rob. And that's a priori reasoning, deductive reasoning. It goes something like this, right? Let me use this analogy. I'm on the beach. I'm looking out at the horizon. The horizon's flat. Voila, the Earth must be flat, right?
Right.
So we kind of know it's not true, right? I mean, the Earth is round. We kind of have good, firm evidence for that. So now, when you're looking at fat and cholesterol from a physiological perspective in the blood, your fat's high or you're overweight or your cholesterol's high. Well, by golly, it must be because we're eating or over-consuming fat and cholesterol in the foods and in the diet, right? I mean, there seems to be, or we want there to be a one-to-one correlation because it makes for everything to be nice and simple. Well, just like it's a somewhat complicated task by looking at the horizon to understand the world is round, it's a somewhat complicated task to understand why, if you're overweight, if there's fat in the bloodstream that's elevated, if your cholesterol is high, that it's not because you're overeating fat and cholesterol, it's because you're over-consuming carbohydrates. But getting back to the controversy, by golly, that controversy still exists. It's ubiquitous. You can't get away from it. I'm a what's the word? A pariah, in my area, Port Jeff Station, Long Island. I'm one of the very few physicians who understands the correct way to eat, but yet my numbers are fantastic when you look at my statistics for type 2 diabetes, for obesity, for heart disease, blood pressure, the list goes on. Most of my patients do not need to take medications.
Wow.
And if they come to me on medications, and I'm talking like 6 or 7 meds, man, I can get them off by simply lowering their carbohydrates. And I don't want the listeners to run out, back off on the carbs and start cutting their medicines and not taking them. That's very dangerous.
Sure is.
But then when I say, find a low-carb doctor, where are they? There's so far and few between, and there's still so much ignorance out there. And I feel one of my things is to try to educate as much as I can, but I don't know when or where or how we're going to stop this ignorance.
You've referred to the correct way to eat a number of times. In your opinion, sir, and based on the practice that you have and your book, what is the correct way to eat?
The correct way to eat is to back off on carbohydrates in their many disguises and their many forms. I refer to carbohydrates as wolves in sheep's clothing. And don't be afraid to eat more fat, more cholesterol, and more protein-containing foods. And I also want to emphasize that I'm not promoting no carbs or zero carbs and high fat, high cholesterol, high protein, as a lot of my patients mistakenly leave and think I said. I'm promoting lowered carbs, so like 20 to 30 grams a day, and more fat, more cholesterol, more protein. Don't be afraid to eat a ribeye steak that has more fat in it. Don't be afraid to eat the egg yolk or use butter or use regular mayonnaise or use whole milk, half and half, heavy creamy cheeses. For these are the things that our body craves and our bodies want us to eat. And I have the privilege and the honor of being a physician and looking at blood tests day zero before people start eating the correct way, and then getting them 3 months out and looking at that blood work and seeing the phenomenal changes for the better, watching patients come off medications or not even needing them in the first place. So for me, what's real and true is what the outcomes are and what I see visually with my own eyes.
I remember when I started the Atkins diet, people who did not have any faith in it said, wait, you're going to start craving. You're going to crave carbohydrates. You can't live without them. And you know what? I got along, and I still get along very well without carbohydrates.
And when a heroin addict is trying to come off heroin or a crack addict is trying to come off crack, they're craving it even more. Don't make no mistake about it. Carbohydrates are a drug. And when we consume carbohydrates, you're getting changes in the brain chemistry that is very similar to changes you see when you're using any type of addictive substance, be it heroin, crack, nicotine, or alcohol. And that's why the first 2 weeks of coming off carbohydrates, you're not only craving them, but you're going through withdrawal, sweating, diarrhea, bloating, abdominal cramping. And as you would crave any drug or a product that you're addicted to, the same is true of carbs. But after you come off them, and after you've been off them, myself now for 16 years, not eating them in the quantities I used to, I no longer crave them, as you don't, I don't crave the carbohydrates. You see, eating fat, more fat, eating cholesterol, more cholesterol, these are natural appetite suppressants. So the more of this you get in your diet, the less hungry you are, the more full you are, and the longer you can go between meals.
It's just a matter of re-educating yourself, making a few modifications to your diet, and you know what? There's a regimen that's followed. And it's common sense. Most of it is common sense. And, thankfully I had a physician who, like yourself, was interested in the right and wrong way of doing things. So, my hat is off to you, sir.
Well, thank you so much, And it's interesting because when I saw the positive changes, when I started eating the way I was instructed not to eat, and I started seeing the positive changes, the weight loss, the blood pressure, and finally when I came off my medications 18 months after starting, eating the correct way, you know what I did? I went back and I ordered the latest editions of all of my biochemistry, cellular physiology, medical physiology textbooks. And this was a pile of textbooks that went to the ceiling, and I reread them. It took me 2 years to get through all this stuff. And I would actually, read something like, or see a pathway where glucose is transformed into cholesterol, and the following paragraph would still say, well, watch out for cholesterol foods. And I'd be like, well, gosh, you show me the pathway for cholesterol production starting with sugar, but then you're going back on what you're showing me and saying to avoid cholesterol-containing foods when you just said 2 pages ago that when you consume cholesterol-containing foods, it shuts off the cholesterol-making machinery in my body. So there's a lot of contradictions in the very textbooks that our undergraduates are using, and even in medical school, if that's not scary enough.
What's the truth behind diet pops with aspartame? Is aspartame as bad as people say it is?
It is not. Aspartame is basically 2 amino acids linked together that give us a sweet taste. Those 2 amino acids are L-aspartic acid and phenylalanine. The only people who need to be cautious with the consumption of this are individuals known as phenylketonuria or PKUs. This is actually even written on the side packaging label for your diet pop and for your cakes and candies that have this. Now, here in America, and I'm sure in Canada as well, our newborns are screened for the absence of this enzyme. And if they don't have this enzyme, then they need to avoid the aspartame. Aspartame is simply 2 amino acids linked together, gives us a sweet taste. When we eat it, we're eating amino acids. It's basically a very, very short dipeptide, to be precise, but a very, very short protein chain that we do not have a problem with. You, as well as I know, it's been blamed on everything from the Gulf War syndrome to multiple sclerosis.
Yes.
And this is a great example of how a little knowledge can really be harmful. And I can see this, what happened. You had somebody who knew a little bit about organic chemistry or biochemistry, looked at the aspartame molecule, saw a formaldehyde side chain or group, and said, oh, my God, there's formaldehyde in there. So we must be getting formaldehyde, when we eat this. Well, that's not the way we break down the product. We break it down into 2 amino acids. We don't cleave it like it was suggested. Let me put it in perspective. In order to get formaldehyde, off that side chain, you'd have to heat your body up to like 800 degrees Fahrenheit. All right? It just isn't going to happen. And that's why a little bit of chemistry knowledge is sometimes a dangerous thing.
How relevant are calories to human nutrition?
Great question. Great question. They're absolutely irrelevant.
Really?
Calories are irrelevant in human nutrition. Now, not to lose anyone, but let me define a calorie. And a calorie is defined as the amount of heat needed to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. And I'll say this to my patients in the examining room, and then I'll look at them and I'll say, what does that mean to you? And I always love this because I get these blank stares, They're like, what? And I'll be like, exactly. They mean nothing. Because think about it. When we're determining a calorie, we're taking a food item. We're putting it into a container known as a calorimeter, which contains water, which has electricity going to the item in question. We have a top on it. We have a thermometer. And we burn this substance, this food thing, to pure carbon. Of course, whenever you burn anything, heat is released. Of course, it raises the temperature on the thermometer, and that's how you calculate your calorie. Now, let me just throw this out there. When I eat a piece of meat, who out there really thinks it goes into my belly and burns? It explodes. Yeah, it doesn't do that. That's not burned. When we determine a calorie, that's a controlled combustion process. When we eat foods, it's digestion, not combustion. So when we derive energy in the form of something called ATP, when we derive energy from these foods, we're not combusting it, we're digesting it. The calorie is determined in a closed system where we know everything: how much water, how thick's the container, how much juice we gave the meat, how much heat was given off. But when you eat that piece of food, that's an open system, and we're still discovering enzymes and these other hormones that help with the digestion and all that. So calories are extremely irrelevant in human nutrition, and I can't stress that enough. They're red herrings, distractors at best.
All right, so if a little bit of knowledge is dangerous, and I agree with you 100% it is, and when you go to the grocery store, you see these people picking up the cans, the packages, and they're looking at the contents. Do they really understand the pros and the cons of what they're reading?
They don't. And me being very proactive in what I do, I literally do this, no joke. I'll go to the supermarkets and I'll look for people looking at side packaging labels. I'll go up, I'll introduce myself, and I'll ask them, what were you looking at? What are you trying? Most of the time, almost always, they're looking at fat. They want to make sure it's low calorie. They want, low saturated fat. They're looking, for, those two things there, low saturated fat, low calories. They don't have a clue. They need to be watching out for, carbohydrates. They don't have really a clue about how to, read side packaging labels at all, or ingredient lists for that matter, and it's scary. It's a scary thing. What I look at when I look at a side packaging label, and this may come as a shock to a lot of people, I want more fat. I want low carbs. I don't want any trans fats. And as a side note, when I buy, say, ground chuck, ground beef, I'm going like with 80% lean, which has more fat obviously than 95% lean, and the 80% lean is less money because more people are buying the lean product.
Yeah.
That's how ignorant we are.
Just like a lot of people could not understand when I started doing the Atkins, is that I would, instead of taking caffeinated coffee, I took decaffeinated coffee, and instead of putting 2% or 10% cream in my coffee, I was putting 35% cream.
Right, which is the exact right thing to do.
Yeah.
And anyone can do this. Like when you go to the supermarket, get your heavy cream, your half and half, your whole milk, and your 2%, 1%, whatever, and put them together. And then I want you to look at the amount of carbohydrates in each one. You got the least amount in the heavy cream.
Yeah.
Half and half has a little bit more, not much, 1 gram. Then you get to your whole milk, which is 12. Then when you get down to your 1% and your zero fat, it increases to like 17, 18 grams of carbohydrates per serving. That's because as you remove fat from a product, you increase the sugar amount of the product. So the more fat you remove, the more dangerous that food item becomes.
One quick question. We've got about 40 seconds before I have to go to break, Doctor. Is drinking milk good for us?
Another loaded question. As long as we're not lactose intolerant, sure. But, I always like to say that cow's milk is for cows, that we really should be avoiding it. And, the milk protein, casein, has been shown to be involved in a lot of autoimmune, illnesses, most notably juvenile diabetes, type 1 diabetes. So I tend to tell people to avoid cow's milk, in general.
All right, Doctor, thank you very much. Please stand by. We have to take our final break. Exo Nation, this is a great hour. Our special guest is Dr. James Carlson. And, as you can see, he is a very knowledgeable person. And he His website is www.drjamescarlson.com. The name of his book, Genocide, How Your Doctor's Dietary Ignorance Will Kill You. I'll be back on the other side of this break with a good doctor as we continue here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Excellent Nation, Dr. James Carlson is our special guest. His website is www.drjamescarlson.com. He's the author of Genocide, How Your Doctor's Dietary Ignorance Will Kill You. Quick question for you, Doctor. Why is it that men seem to have better luck with the Atkins diet or low-carbohydrate diets compared to women?
I love that question, and my first answer is going to be that both men and women have equal success with the Atkins intervention or Atkins way of eating. It just takes women a little while longer to see the weight loss in its entirety. Case in point, male patient, highest amount of weight loss seen on low carb, 185 pounds. Female patient, highest amount of weight loss seen, low carbs, 185 pounds. So equal amount of weight loss, both male and female. It just takes females a little while longer. Women, especially around when they're perimenopausal, which means when they're reaching the menopausal state, they have a tougher time with it. But they still lose. What happens is we're so focused on, and we're inundated with these weight loss supplements, and you're going to lose like 600 pounds the first day you go on it. You know, and you know, if you don't lose 20 pounds every minute, you know, it's a problem. So we think we should have this rapidity of weight loss you just don't see when it's happening the correct way. So men, you know, taking weight off, it starts a lot quicker than for women, but both men and women will definitely do fantastic by lowering their carbohydrates. And if you need to do that, if you're somebody who is obese or morbidly obese, you need to stay at about 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrates for the rest of your life, because we need to understand that stored carbohydrates, you know, or let me put it this way, let me flip it. Extra weight on our bodies in the form of fat is stored carbohydrate from the diet. Right. It's not stored fat from the diet. Like when we eat fat, it doesn't go and get stored in our fat cells. All of the stored fat in the fat cells is modified sugar being stored as excess energy. So I hear it a lot of all the time too, Rob. It's, you know, women come into my practice. Well, you know, I tried it, didn't work for me. But then when I press them further, they only quote unquote tried it for a couple of weeks or maybe 2 months, and they were unhappy because they only lost 5 pounds a month. And I have to gently, remind them that, you know, you're still losing, and only 5 pounds a month is 60 pounds a year. And even if you have to lose, say, 200 pounds, you know, in 4 years, that's 240 pounds, you know. So it can happen. You just need to understand that the process, you know, can be, you know, somewhat delayed if you're a woman, but you still can do phenomenally well with it.
You know, I've had friends who've gone on the Atkins diet, and man, they've lost weight like, wow. And then instead of staying on, they go off the diet, and then they can't understand why they gained the weight back.
I don't mean to laugh, but I hear this all the time. You know, Doc, you know, I backed off on carbs, and I lost all this weight, and then, you know, when I started eating carbs again, I gained all the weight, and so it doesn't work. And I look at them, I go, listen to me, okay? Listen to what you just said. what you're telling me is that you started eating the correct way.
Mm-hmm.
You took off all this weight. Your blood work went back to normal. Everything looked great. And then when you went back to eating the way you shouldn't be eating, everything got worse. Of course it did.
1 and 1 equals 2. Doctor, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll have to have you back on in the future. Take care of yourself. And once again, X-Zone Nation, Dr. James Carlson has been my guest for this hour. drjamescarlson.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break after the news as we continue here in the X-Zone. Don't go away.